Okay, so it's Wednesday night. We're here with Billy, and we are dealing with a topic in production services, which is pinch points and renegotiations. So, the reason I'm bringing this up is because today I had three renegotiations in one day. And I could say that would make me crazy because it almost made me crazy. But I handled each one separately and I just handled them. But I just wanted to talk to you about renegotiations
Okay.
and pinch points. So the first thing is I want to say that I learned from the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People that you should always have a win-win or no deal. So, like if you're working with somebody and it's a win-lose for either party, you
Hmm.
have to cut the deal. So, like if you and I are working together and you're like, "Oh, Andy's really annoying me," you're like, "You gotta cut it." But anyway, that was a bad example on purpose. But the point is like basically, like the way we work at Moira Press is like we're always working towards win-wins because that keeps both parties happy for the duration, right?
Yeah.
And there's other people who say this concept, fuck yeah or no. Have you ever heard that one?
No.
Like it's like if something's not like a F yeah, then it's a no.
Huh.
So
That's weird.
So like I wanted to ask you in your production career, like when you work with bands, do you always feel like heck yeah, or are some like you're like this is painful, but I'm gonna do it, or like I mean,
Um, there is a middle ground to me. Like, sometimes it's like a temporary, uh, no win, you know, like, but it ends up usually in that case being for like the greater good, like I have to take a big pay cut because this band doesn't have any money, or like we have to like do 3 days instead of 5 days, you know.
mm,
That's like not the best situation, but it's for the greater good so that the album gets recorded. That's an example of when it's not like a fuck yeah, you
mm,
know. I mean, I get gung ho to do the thing regardless, but it's not the best situation, always.
yeah,
So sometimes that's a case where it's not always like the greatest situation.
that's a really good point because sometimes as an artist, it's not really about you; it's about a win-win for the greatest good of all concerned.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, I put myself behind a lot of stuff, like, for the greater good, and like I've been criticized for it. People tell me, well, you got to put yourself first, and it's like I don't always feel that way. Like I want to obviously get the most I can out of a situation, but it's like it's not about me. It's about the music, the project, for the greater good. There's sacrifices to be made there for sure,
Mm,
and if it doesn't mess my life up too much, I don't mind doing it once in a while.
mm. Would you say that that's like I hate to be super adulty, but like that's like eating shit?
Not always, not always. Maybe just nibble,
Yeah,
you know. Maybe
that's
just
true.
a taste.
Okay, yeah, yeah. This is
It's
adult
it's a
school.
sacrifice.
I had to swear twice in one paragraph. That well, okay. I see what you're saying. Making sacrifices for the greatest good. So I never thought about that. Like sometimes you have to do a sacrifice moment for the greatest good.
Yeah, like like if a band comes to me and they don't have as much money as I was wanting to make on the project, I'll do it anyway because I would rather work than not work.
Mm,
And it's not an optimal like pay situation, or maybe like we have to squeeze it into less days, which makes longer days. That's a sacrifice I'm willing to make rather than just not doing it and somebody else gets to do it.
interesting. Well, and I would challenge you a little bit to say that there's got to be a way to tweak that so it's still a win-win. So, for example, if somebody has less monetary cash, they can do things like promoting you on Facebook or,
Yeah,
you know, I would argue that you as a tribal elder, I mean, you're actually working for the tribe of metal people and musicians in general. So it's like it's that's where it's not about you. It's about like the whole community at large.
yeah,
But it's like we don't if I don't know. It's like I also don't want. I think that we got to keep it at a win-win somehow. Like that person, if they don't have enough money to pay your value, then they could pay you in some other way.
well, I mean, they generally do. Like, you know somebody takes up the slack somewhere, which makes it not a it doesn't make it a lose at all. It may not be a complete victory, but it's not like a loss either.
Mm,
you know
interesting.
like, they end up either getting you back in some way or like doing extra shout outs or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like I don't know, and I don't know if we're supposed to ask for those things of like, all right, well, do you, or if they should just. I feel like people should intuitively feel those things, but they don't always,
They don't always, and that's just a sacrifice at the end of the day. But like it's also really hard to mention them. It's really hard to like bring them up and be like, hey, if you don't have enough money, you got to get me back in this way. Like I'm not good at that. I don't think I would do that.
Well, and that comes to one of my later points is why should teams be involved in renegotiations? Um, like when I go through a renegotiation, I always talk to my team because I literally can't do it correctly by myself. Like I can't be like, well, you don't have enough money, or I don't mean to use that voice, but okay, you want to work with me, but you can only pay me $25 an hour, and my rate is $60 an hour, or something like that. And then I'm like, let me ask my team about that
Yeah,
and see what the team says, because what would your team say to you working? But I hear you. Like I would rather work. Like one of the reasons I don't charge $175 for an astrology reading, which everyone tells me I'm worth. I'm like, because I like to work, and I don't. I
yeah,
would. I'm a crusty bunk, and I'm like, no thanks. I'd rather do more chart readings for $114 than to do this 175, which is my worth.
yeah.
Plus, it's just too much. But
That comes up often. Like when a new band is coming to me and like so they say, well, what's it going to cost us? I'm like, well, it's a sliding scale. Here's what I've been getting lately. You know,
oh
here's my here's a price. Here's somewhere between this and this. Can you go within those bounds? And if they can, then I'm happy. If not, then we'll work it out. Like you can pay it later. You can pay over time, or we can figure something out.
yeah,
We can always figure it out. But I always say, let's figure it out. Let's not just be like, no, I can't do it because you don't. You know,
yeah.
let's work it out. I
Interesting.
always say that.
Interesting. Well, as your best friend, I really think you should call your team. I'd be
What
like,
team?
me. I'm your
Oh,
team.
okay. I got
I'd
you.
be like, call me when it's time to negotiate and you're getting a little bit of a win lose. Call your team, because your team can be like, well, we're a little concerned that that's way undercutting Billy, but I hear what you're saying. So what can we do? And that's when the team gets to say, is there anything you can do to recompensate for this, inequity of care, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it always gets worked out. It always gets worked out. Like like the last time that happened, where there was a band that couldn't come in under the or between the bounds of what I would normally get. They figured it out to where like um, they could pay over time, you know, and so I get a little money later. So it ends up being like a non-permanent loss. It's like a temporary loss, Like I was willing to sacrifice because I've worked with these guys for years, and they just were going through a rut monetarily because whatever, one dude lost his job or something. They didn't have band funds, but like,
Mm,
um, it ends up that we worked it out so they can pay overtime and everything's good.
yeah.
And it ends up being good for me because it's like money that I wasn't, where I'm not even working with them, I get money.
Interesting.
You know,
Well, I have someone I'm working with right now for free. I'm working with it. Well, she's taking photographs for me in return for, my helping her with production stuff. And it's like, the thing is, that's a win-win for us. We've worked that out. That
yeah,
feels like a win because I actually need a photographer right now,
yeah,
and she's really good. But the thing is, even if her photographs are subpar, I would still do that because she's trying. And she generally needs assistance within what I can provide for her, and also she's an old student of mine and all this stuff. So it's like I'm not just this savage who's like, if you can't pay, like, and she can't pay, but like I'm not even asking her to because she can't, But I am happy to work with her and find a win-win with her.
yeah. That's kind of what I'm saying too. Like we can like monetary isn't the only like subject of win and loss. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's not always about the money, but if it is, we can work it out. You
yeah,
know?
totally. Well, and it's like I think it's little things. Like for example, she always drives to my house to see me. Like I would, if someone's working for, if I'm helping someone for free, I would never drive to their place. Like there's these little subtleties that
Yeah.
make it like even okay, like even between you and I, like um I proclaim that I'm Billy's best friend. That's not actually a fact. Fact check. But anyway, he's got like 1,000 best friends. But the point is I always drive to Billy's house. Now why? Okay, why is that? Well, Billy actually is older than me. He has more social capital than me. He has 9,000 Facebook friends and I have 4,000. And like I consider all these things and decisions. It's like would I ever make Billy come pick me up and do a thing? I'd be like, no, I'll come to you.
But if you needed a ride, I would.
I know. See, that's why we're best friends. But we've been working at these negotiations for like 12 years now. So it's like I think that we've arrived at a place where we definitely feel like things are a win-win here. Like no matter how we're kind of
Yeah.
rolling, you know. But okay, let's talk about conflicts of interest. Okay, in contracting theory, there's when you hit a conflict of interest, you're supposed to renegotiate immediately. So like, have you ever run into a conflict of interest?
Oh yeah, all the time.
What do those look? I mean,
Mostly like with scheduling, but that can all be worked out. Like, there's only been one case I can remember where it was like unworkoutable.
mm-hmm.
Like I accidentally double booked myself. Like I booked something way ahead of time, and then kind of forgot because I didn't hear from them, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, hey, we're getting there tomorrow." I'm like, "Oh shit, I booked something else."
Oh, interesting.
That's the only time I can remember it didn't really get worked out. I mean, I worked it out to where somebody else recorded it and I mixed it. Um, so I worked it out, kind of, but like, yeah, everything's work outable. Like, usually with me, it's scheduling conflicts. And if people really want to do something with me, they're willing to wait, until the schedule is copacetic for everybody. But like conflicts of interest, I'm trying to think of other cases where it wasn't scheduling.
Yeah, I've had like people who want a reading, but they're my ex girlfriend's girlfriend,
Yeah,
and I'm like, and that one I would actually take at this point, but or like there's somebody I work with in outside, like through AA or something, and then they want to be my astrology student. And I'm just like, like conflict of interest. You know what I mean? There
yeah,
there are times where there it's called a dual relationship where it's there's two relationships going on and that's kind of weird or
yeah.
things
I can't think of a time when that's happened. Like, I don't have conflicts with a lot of people like that. Like, as far as bands.
yeah, you don't really have yeah, for me I don't have a lot of conflicts of interest either. um but it is a thing where a renegotiation has to happen is
Yeah,
if a conflict of interest does come up,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
um So, okay. So, what about this? Opening up a contract. So, like, let's say you start working with a band, and this happens to me, like, I'll do a reading for somebody, but really, let's say they have bipolarism, and in the reading, we come up and I say, okay, I can see in your chart that you have multiple poles in the chart, and your manias could be timed astrologically. I know you feel like you have no control over your manias, but I can actually time them, and or an astrologer could time them to the hour, you know. Well, then if they're gonna actually get what they need for their bipolarism, we need to open up the contract to I'm now your teacher. I'm gonna teach you how to read transits, or like that might take 8 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like let's say you're working with somebody on an album, and they think it's gonna take 2 days, but now it's gonna take 2 weeks. Does that happen?
Yeah, that happens all the time. Like, in fact, it happens with most people, even no matter how much experience they have. It happens more with inexperienced people that they think it's going to be faster than it is. Like, they don't realize all the time that has to go into something, especially with recording. Like, bands are like, well, our set's only 45 minutes, so it should only take 45 minutes to record. But they don't factor in, like, you know, this time it takes to get sounds, and the time it takes to set up, and the time it takes to maybe have more than one take of a song. Like, they don't realize that everything's under a microscope when you get in the studio, and things just take longer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and getting everybody situated with headphones, like all these factors go into it taking more time. And like usually when a band's like, oh, we only need 2 days to record, I'm like, well, let's make it four. you know,
Interesting. So you handle that at the beginning, like that's one of the
try.
things you kind of
Yeah,
notice at the beginning.
I try, but also a lot of bands don't have enough money to do like double the time. Because when we're in a studio like Howard Hall's, like they're paying the studio and for me, and it ends up costing them a lot of money. It costs them like $1,600 a day
Mm,
to record, and so they want to get it done as quick as possible. Especially bands that are independent and a label's not paying for it, which is a lot of the work I do.
yeah.
And so there's sometimes there's not a lot of wiggle room, and like I'm like it's gonna take four, but you have to do it in two, so we gotta really hustle. So things get corners get cut here and there sometimes.
Interesting. So let's talk about opening up a contract. So when, let's say you were with a band for a day or 2 days or 4 days, and then you're like, oh, and everyone agrees, okay, this is going to take 4 more days.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with the tense moment of negotiating like the money for the next 4 days and like you know what I mean?
Um, yeah, I mean, usually it's all set up before we go in the studio. What is that?
I don't know something.
Anyway, wow.
Wow,
Can
it's
we
like,
ignore it?
yeah, we can ignore it. I don't know if we can
It's
ignore that.
uh time.
It's like a metronome turned on.
I don't know why. Oh, it's my phone. Oh shit! I'm gonna knock something over.
What's going on with your phone?
It was me.
That's one of
Just
his
cock.
999 other
Just
friends.
cock.
Okay.
What was you saying?
So you're saying that, okay, I want to know what happened. How do you renegotiate for 4 more days?
Oh, well, it's hardly ever that it has to happen on the spot. Like, usually we know how much time we're gonna spend before we go in. Like, every now and then, it's like we get down to the last day in the studio and we realize that we're gonna need more time. It does happen from time to time, but usually we just stick to the original plan of how many days. But like, when it does happen, we have to like, because it has to go through channels. It has to go through whoever's paying for it, and then it has to go through everybody in the band's schedule. So that's like, 4 or 5 people in a band, they all have to check their schedules. I have to check my schedule and then see if the studio has time. So it's like a big deal to renegotiate it during the thing.
Yeah.
Like if we're at Hallett Halls, there's not a lot of chance that they're going to have time the next day after we're booked because they book like 7 days a week and they book like 2 months ahead of time.
Yeah.
And so if we're in the studio and we need another day, it probably is not going to happen.
Yeah.
At least not then, like maybe a couple months down the road.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when we're working here, I can be open ended because I try to leave bookends on either end where there's open days,
Yeah.
and I do that for that reason. Like sometimes mixing, takes longer than you think it's gonna.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and I just think this is something so hard for the artists. Like, one of the reasons I want to make this video with you is like, the point of our production Wednesdays is to like handle all this stuff that no one else on the team understands. Like, see you full on understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like, and this stuff drives me crazy. Like, I'll be trying to be nice to somebody, which I love everybody I work with. I love people, but then I'm like, they really want a thing from me, but we're gonna have to negotiate that new portion. Like, you and I have morphed our work relationship over the last 12 years like 15 times. Like, we did an album together. We've done one-off recording sessions together. Now we're doing our Wednesdays together. Like, and we keep having to renegotiate what is this Wednesday for, and like, I mean, I think in the life cycle of a collaboration, you can have like 15 renegotiations.
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be called a renegotiation. It just is like, okay, here's what we're gonna do tonight.
Yeah.
I'm down for whatever, but yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a container that we're like developing on Wednesdays. Is like when it's like whatever Wednesday,
Yeah, yeah.
but production style. But the thing is, I mean, I think, you know, but this is where I've developed a lot of classes and things. Like, I'm like, okay, you're bipolar, you need to learn to watch your transits. Come to the Tuesday group. That's where we learn this advanced stuff. And so, like, I have basically places like already set up that they can then be filtered into when they need more than, it's. So I mean, it takes 25 years of doing this to have that wisdom to know that you need a group that's beyond just readings, or if you and I are in a little bit different industries, so we're talking about parallel lives here. But
Mm.
but I think for you, it's like, people will record, like my band recorded, Rivercats recorded with you, and now those guys want to remix and master. They want remixes, but they might want to take them to someone else. But maybe they decide they want to work with you. Then you got to not renegotiate, but then that's a new negotiation on how are we going to fund this remastering process.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with that particular project, it's like those weren't even really mixes. They were just like rough mixes, but like, if they wanted to remix it, I would just figure out a day when they wanted to come by and help me mix it, or just give them the files if they want to take it. Like it's not a huge deal really.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a huge deal for you, but I mean, I think what I want people to understand about you and me is that like working with us, you have to negotiate how you're going to work with us. Like for example, let's take a The Rock in wrestling, right?
Okay.
Okay, so The Rock, people start wanting to use The Rock for a bunch of different things
Hmm.
because he's a celebrity, or he's a character, right?
The Rock, yeah, for sure.
So it's like maybe they want to use him in a wrestling match against Hulk Hogan. Okay, well they have to negotiate the terms of the contract.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's say they want Rock to make an appearance in a kids movie. You have to negotiate the terms of that deal.
Oh, yeah. There's lots of terms that we don't even know.
Right. And so I feel like with people like you and me, it's like I'm sorry, but we're at the level where if you want to work with us, you got to negotiate the terms of the contract. Like it's going to be different. Like, do you want me to show up on your podcast? That's a negotiation that has to happen. Is like, how are we going to fund this? How is it paid? What
Mm.
kind of thing. And like, if you want a reading from me, this is how it works. If you want to come to my class, this is how it works. But there's like a million ways that people interface with me, but they're all a different negotiation.
Yeah, everything's different. Like, and usually for me, like the money ends up being the least of, like as long as it is reasonable, I'll generally like consider it. But like the fact that either I'm going to do it or not do it is the bigger thing rather than like the money being the biggest thing. You know what I mean? Like the terms are like, okay, we have this many days to do this much stuff. That's important too. But the fact that I'm either going to do it or not do it is like the biggest thing. The money is kind of secondary to me in a way.
Interesting. So it's like you're kind of not for sale because like if you didn't really like somebody, you would just say no.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't just flat out say no. I would say maybe there's a better person for it. You know,
Yeah.
if
Interesting.
I didn't like the music or whatever. And it's pretty rare when that happens. Like I find good in most music. But there have been times where I was like, yeah, maybe there's a better person for this. Like I'm not really feeling it.
Mhm.
That's happened, very seldom. But like,
That's so cool. Like you and I are a little different. It's not. It's not. I'm kind of the same. Like I'm not for sale. Like you can't pay. Like so, if something is weird about it, you can't pay me enough to do it.
yeah,
It's just like no. Ricky Williams is like this too. He's uber famous, and I work with him on Wednesdays, and he totally shows up, and it's like we just do it because we're friends, But like, but he's like not for sale either. He's like if I don't want to do something, I'll make it really expensive is what he
yeah,
does. And then if he wants to do it, he's like I'll do it for a penny. Like
yeah, yeah.
that's kind of how
I
he
mean,
is.
I've done that before too. Like just not purposely make it difficult, but like you know, scheduling conflicts can be a thing too.
Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. My schedule doesn't allow it. Yeah. Well, and I've honestly, I'm more of I mold and shape it until it's a win-win, and so we can go forward. Like I'm kind of like you, where I'm like I'll keep like, for lack of a better term, massaging the situation
Mm.
until it's a go.
Yeah, that happens too. I don't find myself having to do that much because usually I'm like, yeah, it's reasonable offer as far as money and like I can do it and I like the music, so let's just make it happen. You know,
Yeah,
it's
interesting.
pretty seldom when I would have to say no or like can't work it out. Like usually when there's scheduling conflict, bands are willing to wait. You know.
Yeah, interesting. Well, and I think we're actually very similar in that I go people first and then negotiate second. So, like,
Yeah.
the way I understand this is in astrology, there's something called a composite chart, which is, do we have alchemy? We study those you know about these because we look at them for like band alchemy and things like that. Like, does this band have a good composite and things like that? And, like, but like for example, you and me, the reason I work with you and I'm relentless. Like this is my producer, and I've been tried. People have tried to talk me out of it for whatever reason, and I'm like, no.
Really?
Well, Billy and I have the best composite chart, and so I go person first and then project second. Like I'm gonna work with Billy, and then we're gonna figure out how we're gonna interface secondly.
Mm.
So I feel like you and I are similar. Like you're like person first, negotiate second, kind
Yeah. I mean, it's about the music to me,
of. Yeah.
and being being able to work on a project and them being able to have me work on it. You know, it's
Yeah.
worth a lot to both of us.
Okay, so let's talk about closing down a contract because we just talked about opening up a contract.
Okay.
Let's talk about closing them down. So this is this is one of the negotiations I had to do today. I had to close down a contract because the person, and this person I love dearly, and I definitely want them in my life still.
Mm.
But the contract we had, this was actually a non-work related contract. It was just like an agreement to do a thing together for free. but they cancel on me 4 times. And I was like, I can't schedule with you anymore because you cancel on me 4 times. That actually cost me money. I could have put work in that spot.
Yeah, I've had that happen before.
So how do you close down a contract nicely?
You mean like get out of something?
Kind of.
I mean, I don't know. I've I've rarely had to say like cut somebody off forever. I've never. I don't think I've ever done that. Like it reminds me of this situation with this person I've been wanting to work with for years, and they've been wanting to work for me with me. But every time he schedules something, he backs out, and I'm like, now I've just become used to it. Like if he's gonna book time, I just take it with a grain of salt because he's backed out every single time over like 15 years.
Wow. I can't
But
believe you would still book with him.
I don't tell him no. I'm just like, yeah, if it happens, cool. If not, I'm gonna take it with a grain of salt. Like I'm not gonna tightly book around it or anything.
Yeah.
If it happens, cool. Like just show me that you're sending a deposit, and that's when it'll be serious. You know,
Yeah.
like if we're gonna record in a studio, put me in touch with them so I know that you've sent them a deposit, and then it'll be serious. But like, yeah, I'll work with you, sure.
Hmm.
Let's do it. Just let me know when you send a deposit, and I'll put it in my calendar. You know,
That's a good way to deal with that. Yeah,
yeah.
that's so interesting. I love that you bring that up because that's what I'm talking about. Is there's sometimes see like with me, if that had happened maybe twice, I would never even work with that person again because that cost me money. I'm like, you even saying that you're going to be on my schedule, I have to autistically start building pictures of how I'm going to work with you.
Yeah.
You're costing me money to think.
I mean, this
Honestly.
person one time they wanted me to play bass on the thing, and like I learned all the music, I learned all the songs, and then they backed out on me at the last minute. Like,
Hell no.
in fact, I think he had even bought a plane ticket maybe to go to Utah. Um, this guy I know from Utah that has had a couple bands over the years. He wanted me to play bass on it. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I learned all the music, and then like a week before I was supposed to go, he's like, yeah, I can't do it. This and that, this and that. Um, I was like, fuck, I wasted all that time learning those songs. But next time he called like 3 years later, I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
Oh my
if it
god, you're
happens, cool.
crazy.
If
If
it
you would have
happens, it
called
doesn't.
your manager, which is me, I would have been like, hell no.
Yeah, but then if it happens, then I'm like sitting at home going, man, I wish I would have booked that.
What? See, okay, my problem with that guy is my heart chakra would be closed to him. I'd be like, you have made my heart chakra into like a tiny
No,
valve.
I can't do
I
that
can't even.
because I know that things happen. Like in his case, it's pretty extreme, and I think drugs are involved.
Oh yeah.
But like, I know that shit happens. You know, I've had to back out on stuff before too because shit happens.
Yeah.
Like stuff just happens. It could be anything, and so I realize that, and I'm not going to hold it against the person for backing out. Um, as much as possible. Like, if he really dicked me over badly, I would, it would be different. But like, it's just like stuff happens.
Yeah.
I know this, and so I'm empathetic to that. But like, yeah, do I wish I had back the time that I spent learning those songs? Yeah, but I've always wanted to work, and he's very talented, and so like, if it does happen, then cool. And if I just cut him off, then it will never happen.
Well, okay, there is something to be said for like people who are famey or have social capital. Like, like Ricky Williams and I, we show up for each other. We do that for free. But the thing is like we're equal. Like I do all the production work. I post a video. I get all the guests. I do all that. And he shows up and he comes and goes because he goes out of town for things. But like I let him come and go and kind of cancel on me a little bit because he's got a more complex situation than I do, and he's got a lot more social capital than I do. You know what I mean? So it's like, in that case, like that's still a win-win. But he's an artist I love working with. Just he's a great mind. You know what I mean? And I just love Ricky. I mean, all of those factors are considered. If there was another person I did a video with, and he's very famous in astrology, and he was late, and he like got the time mixed up and all this stuff, and I put up with it because of who he is.
Mm.
But if that was somebody who was like an intern of mine who I was helping out, they had no fan base, all this kind of stuff, and they canceled on me several times and were late, I'd be like, why am I working? This is a win lose. Like, why are we doing this?
Yeah,
But see, how can I say that without seeming like a savage?
it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to not sound like a savage if you have to do that.
Yeah. And that's renegotiations hurt my heart, which is why I want to talk to you about this.
Mm.
I know you probably are like, why are we not playing music? But I'm like,
Mm.
this is actually the stuff that breaks my heart. is, you know, like today I had to renegotiate because someone canceled on me, and I was like, okay, well, what's your cancellation policy? And she's like, I don't have one. I just reschedule. And I was like, oh my god, but you just cost me $100. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to explain, but then it literally breaks my heart every time I get like kind of into a pickle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like if it doesn't for me if it doesn't affect me outwardly, I don't get super bent out of shape about it. Like there's been times when I booked something and took a deposit and then they couldn't make it and I had to keep the deposit, rather than just reschedule them for a few days later. Like there's been times when that happened, and it is kind of crappy to have to do that, but that's what a deposit's for. You know,
Yeah,
that's why you get a deposit is in case they cancel or in case they back out of it. Like that's what a deposit is for.
interesting.
And there's also been times when I didn't get a deposit and that happened, and it is really a bummer because usually that ends up they take care of me in some way, like they'll compensate me for half the time or whatever. But like, yeah, there's been times because it's a friend of mine or whatever because I don't get a deposit and then they back out and it's like, okay, well, how are we going to deal with this? It's just on a per case basis.
Right, right, right. Well, and I guess the point of making this video is to say this is why I work with a team and this is why artists have managers and agents
Yeah,
is because they constantly get messed with. I mean, in one way or another, tiny ways or
yeah,
little or big ways. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And then if when I don't have a bodyguard, and a manager, and an agent, then I have to be mean when I'm actually really nice,
yeah,
and I'm just getting literally messed with in one way or another. And so then I have to be like, let me talk to my team about that. And then
right,
all of a sudden they get in shape, and I'm like, why didn't you just treat me with the same respect you would have treated me if you knew I had a team? You know what I mean?
yeah.
Which I do now.
That's a difference though. It's like I figured, like when I did have a manager for a while, and it ended up she was a friend of mine, but it ended up to where it felt like me versus the bands. Like she was negotiating things that didn't need to be negotiated, like hotel rooms. She had all these standards that she wanted for me to like have a certain kind of room, a certain kind of
Yeah.
hotel. And it's like I don't really care about that kind of crap, and it made me feel like it was me versus the bands. Whereas
Interesting.
like my team is the bands. Like we work on it as a team together. Like it, it's more often that I've been a team with the band against the label rather than me against the band. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
my team is the band in a lot of ways. And when I had a manager, it felt like the opposite. It felt like it was me versus the band because she's negotiating all these things on my behalf without me being present for it. And
Yeah.
so I ended up not having a manager because of that because it was like I it's just better to cut out the middle person.
Yeah. Well, the way my team works and my manager and stuff is they never get involved unless I go to them and say, hey, I need
Hmm.
help with this. Like, I do all the negotiation myself. Like, if a person wants to get on my show, they need to talk directly to me. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? They don't go through my manager to get to me. They just talk to me, you know?
yeah,
But I think I call in my manager it's like the manager comes in when, well, okay, they do this in like my boyfriend's a computer programmer, and they call meetings all the time on projects. Like they'll be like, oh, we need a meeting for this, we need a meeting for
yeah,
that. And it's like, I just think artists actually are a team. Like when you get to a certain level, it takes a negotiation of a whole community to make sure that you're shared among the people. Like it's like I need a bunch of people need access to me for different levels of their development, and
mm-hmm.
we all have to share me now. But like, how can we do that without me getting beat up in that process? And I
Yeah.
think that's where they come in.
Right. More cock. Um, Yeah, I mean that happens from time to time with me too. Like everybody has to sort of talk. Like even multiple bands have to talk with each other. Like sometimes I'll go to Europe and like while I'm there I'll try to do like 3 or 4 projects while I'm over there.
Yeah,
And sometimes it happens that those bands have to communicate with each other and be like my team in Europe to sort out the plane tickets and all that crap. But it's like ultimately it's me and the bands working together as a team.
well, that's an interesting, tweak for me is to say I should consider my students and I as a team.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, that's the difference between you and me is that you have students.
yeah,
I just have peers.
That's true.
You know, I'm not teaching these people, generally speaking. Like if I was running an intern program or something, they would be my students, and it would be a much different thing.
Yeah.
But like I'm working with my peers,
Yeah.
so I'm not like teaching. I'm on a level with all the people I work with, and so it's more of a team thing. Whereas if you're with constantly a bunch of students, it's you, you know, it's you like being the leader and like teaching them or whatever. Like that's a big difference. That probably isn't
Well, they
comparable.
are a team. Like for example, on our Tuesday group, we have a few new students who are extremely talkative, and so I've tried to. How do I figure out how to let them talk enough and still hold a good class for everyone? And I was like, oh, okay, we need an after party. So what we negotiated there is I would teach for an hour and then they can stay. I give one of them hosts. They stay an after party, and
Mm-hmm.
they've been staying for like hours on and partying after my thing on Tuesdays. And it's like I'm always searching for that win-win, and I do think we do function kind of like a crew. You know, it's like
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm like, all right, what are we doing about this? What are we doing about that? Like I definitely do. I think have that team vibe. You know, so
Yeah. Like
but,
even when I'm at Hallett Halls and I have a bunch of interns that are sort of there to help me, like they're also my team. I don't treat them like underlings. You know, I mean they're there to like do what I say, but like they're more like my team. You know, like it's the team that's behind me to like make the band comfortable.
yeah,
You know, and so they are students, but they're also my team.
yeah.
You know,
Well, I had this realization that anyone has a team. Like I was watching this plastic surgery show. What's it called?
Housewives of Beverly Hills.
No, it was botched or whatever.
Uh,
Where there's these two amazing plastic surgeons, and they have a team. They have a medical team. Doctors have teams of nurses and nurse practitioners, and lawyers have paralegals, and it's like if you're doing anything in life that is worth anything, you have a team.
Generally, yeah. Like for me, it depends on the situation. Like if I'm just here mixing by myself, I don't have a team. You know, it's just me and the band. But the band is my team at that point. You know,
Yeah,
even if they're not here, like we're working on it together.
yeah. I mean, I would argue with you that you could use a negotiation team. Like, I do kind of like joke with Billy that I'm his manager, but I do actually come in sometimes when you're having negotiations about things,
Hmm.
and that's because I firmly believe that we all need a team, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I would never interfere. You know me. I would never be like you against the band. I'd just be like, What's the question?
Mm,
Anyways, thanks for talking to me about this. I know that like maybe you think it's superfluous to talk to me, but that's actually what I hired you for.
I don't think that.
What?
I don't think that.
Talking,
Talking
talking heels. All right,
words coming out of mouths.
all right. Well, thanks for talking.
You're welcome.